The Straits are in great shape. We've knocked out all of their boats. They have some missiles, but not very many. I think we're in very good shape.
They are exercising sheer desperation in the Straits of Hormuz. Something we're dealing with. We have been dealing with it and don't need to worry about it.
It's Ken Harbaugh with the MeidasTouch Network. No need to worry about it. That's the message from the Secretary of Defense about the closure of the Strait of Hormuz as oil hovers at $100 a barrel. In my former life as a Navy recon pilot, I deployed multiple times to this part of the world and flew countless missions over the strait gathering intel on Iranian targets. We have known for decades that closing the Strait of Hormuz is on page 1 of the Iranian military's playbook. And yet the Trump administration, in an astounding example of incompetence and arrogance, had no plan for this, for something that every military planner who's ever looked at this part of the world will tell you should have been priority number 1. The U.S. Navy used to have purpose-built minesweepers stationed in Bahrain. Hegseth's DoD decommissioned them last year and shipped them to Philadelphia for scrapping. Their replacements have never been tested in combat and are riddled with problems that the Navy flagged 9 months ago. And just a few days into the war, a couple of those ships left the Gulf for Malaysia. The Navy will not say why. Perhaps the only thing as staggering as the Trump administration's incompetence is its callousness. Yesterday, we talked about the U.S. military bombing a girls' school in Iran and then Trump lying about it. This latest comment might just top that.
Trump indicated that there might be more strikes on Kharg Island to come, saying he may hit it a few more times just for fun. Yes, that's a real quote.
Just for fun. An actual quote. When I say that war is just a game to the Trump regime, I mean it. They think it's fun. My guest today has been to war. He lost soldiers in Iraq. I've known Fred Wellman for almost 2 decades. In addition to being a fellow MeidasTouch host, Fred is a West Point graduate, a Ranger-qualified Army aviator with 4 combat tours, and now a Democratic candidate for Congress in Missouri's 2nd District. Here's our conversation. Fred Wellman, always great to see you, man. You got a hell of a race on your hands down there in Missouri, and we'll get to it. But I want to talk about this ridiculous and obscene warrior cosplay coming out of the White House. I think the most public example is this war porn that the White House is producing. I don't know who there thinks it's cool, but it's not someone who's been to war. Right. And then you have the people in Trump's orbit, like your buddy Mark Wayne Mullen. And I'm going to flash this epic, historic tweet up on the screen here back in the Signalgate days, which seems like a lifetime ago, right? I
know, right?
That
9 months.
Scandal
as 9 months ago.
That should have ended. Yeah. That should have ended Pete Hegseth's god-awful reign there. And instead, we have this bloodlust coming out of the Pentagon, cheered on by the White House social media accounts. And it's emanated by all these dudes who think that war is a video game. Right. As an actual warrior, as you flew Apaches, right? 64.
Scouts, 4 Apaches, and then Blackhawks. So I was a scout.
Okay. Man, how do you react?
Well,
to all this?
I think we have to start first too by doing something that Pete Hegseth didn't do this morning in his press conference. The first thing you and I need to acknowledge as veterans is that last night it looks like we lost 6 more of our service members, 6 more Air Force people in what looks like a crash, an accident of a KC-135. Right now, there's 6 more families mourning the loss of their members, trying to figure out what to do with their lives, and we have to recognize that that's war. War is a family member deathly afraid of a knock on the door of men and women in full uniform telling them the worst possible news. And I always start there. You know, I was a warrior, then I became a public affairs officer. But joking aside, I spent almost 18 years of my career as a combat line aviator. I was a scout helicopter pilot, and anybody, you know, I landed in Desert Storm. We landed and went through the burned out tanks. I know the smell. I can tell the difference between a tank that was empty and a tank that had men in it from the smell of the burn. And that stays with you, and it changes you. And real warriors understand that. And to see people like Pete Hegseth and these children at the White House social media account and others treating it like a video game, treating it like it's a sport, like they're running up the score, look, the score, no matter what you think you're scoring against the enemy, 6 dead wins out and another 8 dead in a CP. And what I've seen, Ken, is while they're doing this dancing in the end zone, we have families suffering. And we're finding out the truth. We find out that the men and women who died in the attack on the CP in Kuwait were in an unprotected command post that had no overhead cover, that they had warned higher up, hey, we're against the people. We've been in a drone. You know better than anyone that you've been to Ukraine. I have not been to Ukraine. You know, we've been fighting Iranian drones there for 3 years. How do we go to war with the country that made those drones and place our service members in a combat zone against that enemy without overhead protection from drones? And this is why I have a simmering rage about Pete Hegseth, because this is on him. This was his job. His job was to prepare for this war. His job was to coordinate with our allies. For example, within a day of that, we had 3 F-15s get shot down by a Kuwaiti F-18, a friendly fire. Again, it's the Secretary of Defense's job and his staff to coordinate with our allies. So again and again, what I see is the most abysmal failure that is costing us lives and treasure from Pete Hegseth. And what does he do? He goes on TV and brags about how we're killing mercilessly and unconditional surrender. And it just reeks of a bloodthirstiness that is, I don't want to say, I can't find the words. Inappropriate just doesn't do it. It's sickening. And I've buried men. I lost men in combat 35 years ago. A month ago, my first 2 men died in combat when their OH-58 didn't return from my new mission. I live with that to this day. I don't think Pete Hegseth has any weight on his shoulders in any way of the men and women that have died in this war. He doesn't feel anything about that. And that should scare the American people 1,000 times more than anything else going on in that room. The fact that the man who sent these men and women to die doesn't care.
It's Ken Harbaugh. What you're about to see in this trailer for the upcoming Midas Defense documentary, Drone Hunters of Kherson, is real combat footage shot by me and my crew in Ukraine. Over the past few years, I've gone back to the front again and again, embedding with Ukrainian suicide drone crews and anti-drone units from rooftops overlooking Kyiv to the Black Sea coast to trenches outside Kherson. That access didn't come easily. It took time and a level of trust that gets built by showing up when others won't. Drone Hunters of Kherson is the culmination of that work, a documentary that puts you inside the units that are writing the playbook for the battlefields of the future. What these crews are doing right now in Ukraine, the tactics, the technology, the bravery, has direct bearing on what American forces are facing in the Middle East today. This is the future of warfare, and it's not theoretical. It's happening now.
Run. The contest between who gets who first. Do they get the drone, or does the drone get them? We're that close to the front. There's rubble everywhere, but people are still surviving. We just got an alert that there is a wave of 12 Shaheeds flying in over the Black Sea. Fire! That's the amazing thing about this war. It's a blend of trench warfare and Terminator.
Well, Donald Trump certainly doesn't seem to bear any of that weight. You talked about dancing in the end zone as people are dying. Donald Trump is literally doing his idiotic dance at Mar-a-Lago as American service members are downrange risking their lives. We're going to find that clip and roll it here. But it, to me, stands in such sharp contrast with George W. Bush, who I'm no fan of. I think he set us on this path, but at least he had the presence of mind, the dignity to not golf during the entire misadventure in Iraq. He did not want to be filmed golfing as caskets are being returned home. He deserves a lot of blame for a lot of things, but at least knowing that he's responsible for that and not golfing, not playing a game as Americans are dying. This regime that Trump administration and Donald Trump in particular have you get zero sense that they understand that burden at all.
Exactly. And I've been saying a lot in speeches lately. I had the honor here, as I'm running for Congress, I was invited to speak to the awards ceremony of our local Civil Air Patrol about my leadership experience. And I tossed out my entire speech as this war was getting ready to unfold. And I said, you as young leaders need to understand that when we talk about the burden of leadership, it's a real thing. There's a term that, the mantle of leadership. I actually looked it up. A mantle is actually a heavy robe. It comes from the Bible. That ancient leaders, clerics would wear as a heavy robe, and it felt heavy. That the burden of leadership for me is a heavy weight. And I look back at Hal and Mike, my two men that were killed 35 years ago. I look back at Dr. Muhammad, my partner Iraqi, who was murdered in the clinic I built for him in 2011. I look back at all the things, the decisions I made as a leader, and I feel like we should have people who feel the weight of leadership. That it should be a burden. I want men and women. I want to send I have a son-in-law who's still in the National Guard. I have a son who's a veteran. I want to know that they're in the hands of people who feel the burden of the decisions they'll make. And I don't feel like Donald Trump or Pete Hegseth, or frankly, what I call the Republican doormat Congress. Harry Truman is a Missouri guy. He had the do nothing Congress. We have a doormat Congress who simply sits there and gets walked over by Trump. I don't believe that anyone in that place feels the burden of understanding that their actions or inactions, in the case of the Congress, have sent our sons and daughters to war, and they're dying. And even worse, that have no sense of the fact that there's people on the other side dying. They've dehumanized the Iranian people so much that they're crowing about killing. They're crowing about like a bloodthirstiness. Lindsey Graham, John Fetterman, a Democrat, saying, I'm glad we killed them. We should kill more. These are still human beings. And when we get to a point what bothers me so much, Ken, is in the same speech, in the same press conference where Pete Hegseth is talking about killing and we're going to wipe them out, these bloodthirsty terms, he ends it with a prayer to God. Like, wait a minute. The God I was raised on, I was raised in the Catholic Church. The God I was raised on values all life, including our enemies. You were in combat. You know what we did after we shot an enemy and he was on the ground incapacitated? We bound his wounds. We shipped him to our hospital. We did that. We took care of them. I know of friends who took care of civilians and enemy soldiers under fire and evacuated them under fire from his comrades, because that's who we are as American soldiers. That's who we are as a moral nation. And to see the people who lead us with this bloodthirsty bloodlust against people who've turned them into cartoon characters, literally in videos, it's disgusting. And the American people should be disgusted by this. And if they think our service members are getting off on this, they don't know service members for real. Maybe there are, there's always these guys, the tough guys, the bros who get off on this stuff. But the average guy and girl is getting into that aircraft. They're getting into that boat. They're getting into that missile context. And they understand that what they're doing is deadly and lives are going to be lost. I mean, that's why we have PTSD. Some of the worst PTSD we deal with is our drone operators. Yeah. I mean, imagine their lives right now. Those drones, those predators, they're being operated from a base probably in Las Vegas. And that guy goes to work and he's dropping missiles on people's heads and he sees the death and destruction. And then he clocks out and goes home to his family. Can you imagine that life? And I don't think that Donald Trump or Pete Hegseth do.
No, I don't think they do. And I think we need to dedicate a special episode to moral injury and the consequences of this kind of war on the soul, not the psyche, on the soul. Even when your life isn't at risk, which is, the main criteria for PTSD, the moral injury you suffer from being asked to do this kind of thing and seeing the aftermath in, for example, a girls' school that we double tapped. I mean, and then having the administration lie about it and having the president himself saying the Iranians hit their own school with a tomahawk. I think the damage to American credibility from this war is going to last generations. I mean, we've already had so much we've had to clean up after Iraq, after Afghanistan. This takes it to a whole new level with the president himself outright lying, not out of confusion or lack of information, but just blatantly, brazenly lying because he lies like he breathes.
Yeah.
And even Hegseth couldn't countenance that lie standing over his shoulder. He at least said, we're investigating it. But you don't foment rebellion by lying about killing kids.
Yeah. Right. And look, here's the deadly calculus that we learned in Iraq. And I worked for General Petraeus. I worked for him as a combat aviator. I worked as his spokesman. And we learned a deadly calculus in war. And the deadly calculus of war that no one wants to talk about, and there is an Air Force general kind of touched on it yesterday in a hearing, is that when I kill one, I create 3 more. And we used to talk about that being in a guerrilla war, or not a counterinsurgency. But I believe that's the case here. And it's the case everywhere, is we are not making friends. Okay. The Iranian people, the innocent people of Iran who are in between this, that we want to believe that, right? That the regime is the regime and there's innocent people, just lost 175 girls and our teachers. Okay. Do you think they're feeling like they should be our friends now? Like that we're lying about, the deadly calculus that when I kill those, we've now created more members of the IRGC. You create more enemies.
That was an excerpt of my conversation with Fred Wellman. For the full interview, check out my Substack page. The link is below. Thanks.
Love this video? Support independent media and unlock exclusive content, ad-free videos, and custom emojis by becoming a paid member of our YouTube channel today. You can also gift memberships to others. Let's keep growing together.